Good morning, everyone. My name is Nisha Witt. I am the CEO and founder of Aesop Technologies. So before we begin, let me ask you a couple of simple questions. Have you ever imagined yourself, ideally in a small classroom, surrounded by 30 other people, where there's absolutely no ventilation, and the only light that you have is coming through a window? Or, if you're at night, getting cozy with your favorite book, however, the only light that you have is coming from a kerosene lamp. Typically, the answers to these questions would be no. However, there are a lot of people in this world that live like this on a daily basis. In fact, in 2015, 1.3 billion people were living in the dark every single day, worldwide. So you're asking yourself, well, that's terrible news, but what does that have to do with NASA? What is the common solution that can fulfill NASA's needs, but that it also can benefit 1.3 billion people in this world? Well, the answer is quite simple. It's 800 watts. Just to kind of give you an overview of what we do solar technology development. And what we're striving is cater to the other 60% of the global market. And by achieving that goal, we have Aesop Nucleus. Aesop Nucleus is a micro solar concentrated power system utilizing free piston Stirling technology. In conjunction with working with the engine, you have our dish, which is a mirror dish that can produce a maximum power of 820 watts. But before I can explain as to how Nucleus can change the face of solar technology, we first must understand where solar technology came from. Starting in 1839, the first solar cell was created by a French physicist by the name of A.E. Becquerel. In 1951, the original silicon cell was rated at the efficiency of 4%. In 1962, the very first solar-powered telecommunication satellite was launched into space by Bell Telephone. And as we fast forward in less than 20 years later, the first solar panels were installed on the rooftop of the White House. Now that we're in the 21st century, photovoltaic systems are commonly used everywhere. Not only do you see them in the commercial market, but you're also starting to see them consume the residential as well. So to sort of capture the magnitude of how impactful photovoltaic systems have been for the global economy, if you look initially at 2013, $424 billion was evaluated. As we fast forward, by the end of 2019, you're looking at a potential $800 billion business. So you can honestly say there's no doubt that photovoltaic systems have revolutionized the way we use renewable technologies. However, there are some issues dealing with them. For example, you still need an excessive amount of area to produce a fairly decent output. Also, of all the rooftops that are available for installation, you can only use 40% of them. As we transition into the space solar, currently NASA is using silicon-based solar technology, which is ideally not used for long-term use. So to sort of extend the life of those silicon cells, you need sort of large, thick glass sheets to protect them from the harsh conditions of space. So overall, it's expensive. For a typical 16-array flank, which is equivalent to a football field, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars being putting towards those systems. So it leads us back to our initial solution, which is Aesop Nucleus. Now, like I said before earlier in the presentation, that Aesop Nucleus is a micro solar concentrated system utilizing free piston Stirling technology. For those that are not familiar with Stirling technology, very simple, basic layman's terms. You have heat. The heat will convert into kinetic energy. The kinetic energy, in this case, would feed into magnetic wires, and then those magnetic wires would produce the electrical charge. So to take it a step further into the diagram of how the flow process of the engine itself, you have the engine, which would normally be filled with any sort of thermoconductive gas, such as helium or hydrogen. And at the bottom, you would see there would be like some sort of feed of heat. And when that gas is being heated, it causes an expansion. This is where the kinetic energy begins. It'll take the displacer and then it will shift it upward, which will cause like a gust of air, lack of a better term, through the vents that are in the partition. That air will then cause this power piston to shift upward as well. And then if you see this piece right here, that would be normally surrounded with some sort of magnetic coils or a linear alternator that can produce that electrical charge. So now that you have a concept of how Aesop Nucleus works, let me tell you about the advantages of using the system. It's small and compact, so it can be easy to transport. It's competitive. It has a better performance in wattage output. It can be a remotely operated system, but most importantly, it's affordable to the available market. So this is our pipeline for how we're going to enter the market on Earth. Initially, we want to start gaining the federal partnerships through DoD, NASA, and the Department of Energy, while also adding on to more of the third-party validations that we already have. A year or so from now, we want to expand our federal partnerships into the Department of Homeland Security. So pretty much what we want to specifically do with the Department of Homeland is that we want to work in the emergency/disaster preparedness sector of the department. As we jump to 2020, this is where we'll already create some revenue through our contracts and our agreements. Now, do you remember the 1.3 billion people that I had mentioned earlier? Well, this is where we're going to be starting to reach and access and provide our services to them. By utilizing the first two sectors as leverage through partnerships and collaboration, we can build a global community of goodness that is revolving around our technology, Aesop Nucleus. By 2025, we'll already be considered a competitive product in the solar industry. And then by 2030, we want to take the lead in solar Stirling generation for not only space, but also in key areas on Earth as well. So the implementation for NASA is very basic. We ideally see this as part of the space-based generation product. In fact, just recently, or excuse me, not recently, but 2 years ago, NASA had released a request of information on Stirling-powered systems that can support the future missions for space-based and deep space exploration. So how are we going to make money? Well, it's very simple, 3 ways. The first way is going to be a licensing agreement where we would reach out to the photovoltaic system distributors, and we can ask them, do you want to make more money? Hopefully the answer would be yes. And with that opportunity, they will be able to gain customers that they ideally could not reach before. Second would be our leasing. So if the customer does not want to purchase the system up front, we can offer a payment plan that can help them alleviate the burden of upfront costs, which is $89 a month per unit, which if you average that out will be about a 10-year payoff time. And then we can do a full purchase of $10,999 with a 15% discount rate for every 5 units they buy from us. So if you look at our team, you have myself with a background in environmental sciences and sustainability, and also I'm a Navy veteran, so I have also mechanical skills. And then if you look at Mr. Travis Peckham, he has a background in not only engineering skills, electrical engineering skills, but also optical enhancement. So to kind of take a look at the snapshot of our financial projections, and overall, in a matter of a 5-year time frame, we're looking at $1.3 billion in gross revenue. If we are able to just capture just 15% of the available market, you're looking at a $4.5 billion business in direct sales. But overall, by the end of year 5, we want to have at least 586,000, or excuse $586 million in net income. So why are we here? Well, obviously, we would like to have a partnership with NASA, but more specifically in the material technology to help put towards our engine. Also, we want to tap into the Department of Energy and utilize their laboratory facilities, specifically the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, for any equipment and system testing. We want to definitely expand our Aesop team with software engineers and also customized electrical systems engineers. And then last but not least, the same request that you've probably heard 7 times and since yesterday morning is funding. We want to have a seed funding of at least $100,000. What is the incentives for investors? Well, we obviously have a clear market as to where solar technology is heading. Also, we have a scalable price product that can potentially make it affordable for the other 60% of the market to purchase and use. What is the incentive for NASA? Well, NASA's looking for the type of technology that we're building. Also, I sort of want to place emphasis on this last piece. The specific power ratio for Aesop Nucleus is a lot better in comparison to what's already on the market. So for us, we're able to produce 29 watts per kilogram. And that is all from Aesop. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. What kind of materials are you using for your device? And what kind of materials you would like to use? Are you thinking about developing new materials for your device?
So thank you for that question. So the materials, ideally for the metals, we want to do some sort of highly conductive material, so like a copper, aluminum. It definitely alleviates the cost of metals. And then for the insulation, because particularly what we are striving for is to have an integrity that is above, 90%, because that's one of the key things when you're dealing with sterling technology is to make sure that it is very well insulated. And one of those things for the partnership that we can use to our benefit is finding materials that are not ideally found on the commercial market. So that's one of the things that we're, the biggest part is the insulation and the lining of the engine. You're welcome. Thank you.
I was wondering if you had built a working prototype, some proof of concept to show the efficiency and some of the performance parameters.
Right. So we pretty much we're still a little bit early. However, we already have proof of concepts, but on a macro scale. So when you're going out to the West Coast particularly, and you see those large macro concentrated farms, that's pretty much what my system is. It's just on a smaller scale. So we're making it where it is manageable and transportable and easy to sort of maneuver, but yet can be scalable for a smaller market that ideally PV systems are not servicing.
Can you talk about the competition?
So currently, we do have a lot of competition. Like photovoltaic market is still very relevant today. I know that companies like Tesla Energy, they just recently had produced their solar roof tiles. So that's one of those things where it's minimizing space for the residential market to worry about. So, but the only issue with that is that when you're utilizing Tesla Energy's products, you still have to sort of own your home. There's a lot of people that are not able to purchase their home yet, or living in a very efficient home so that it's small. So that's one of the things that we can sort of reach out to into the market. But right now, our competition is primarily the photovoltaics market.
What's the status of your relationships with the DoD? I guess you've commented on NASA and then DOE.
So, I mean, those relationships have not been established just yet. The only relationships that I do have are currently with two other commercial third-party validation companies. And pretty much by any means, they're not small. They can definitely make a huge impact on how I can enter into the commercial market. But in regards to the federal partnerships, this is pretty much what I'm shooting for, well, pretty much striving to accomplish here.
Is there any IP associated with this that you own, or that or other approaches that uniquely discriminate you from the competition?
No, I mean, when it comes to the design and functionalities of Stirling engines, it's an open source technology. The only thing that makes it classified as an IP is the materials, the volume, the quantity and the ratios of your engine that makes it private. And so that's the only benefit to utilizing Stirling technology. So for the functionality and the basics of it, no, there is no IP for it.
So another question, unrelated. So you have a quote in there that this one model that you have is targeting like a 3.2 kilowatt output. Is that continuous power for 5 years between maintenance of the consumables?
Great. And if you don't mind, I'll talk to you on the side about that as well.
So we talk at the table.
Yes, thanks for the great presentation.
Thank you.
At what point would you be able to do a cost comparison on a kilowatt or a watts output comparison to, say, a solar city system? You know, how much it costs you per watt to install?
That's a very good question. In regards to when we'll be able to do that, I mean, first we would obviously have to get that prototype up and running and sort of do lab testing. But ideally, one of the biggest things is obviously the labor and, you know, that's associated with the installation of the wattage and making sure that it is a cost-effective system that we could implement to the market. Now, initially, we're not going to go directly to the residential market. We sort of want to utilize this for the more of the federal industry, because they can do the mass production or pretty much reduce the cost through mass production. So I mean, by pretty much middle of 2020, then we can pretty much take that number and sort of evaluate that.